Hello, YouTube! I am Pinstar, and this is Surviving Mars Strategy and Tactics, Episode 1. So, today we are going to be diving into a brand new playthrough of Surviving Mars, and I'm going to specifically focus on getting our first dome built and perfected. Even on the harder difficulty level. This dome, I've been refining this particular design. I call it the Launchpad Dome, and it has nothing to do with rockets, although it does help with your rockets. But anyway, I digress. Let us dive in, shall we? We'll be starting up a new game. Once again, I'm going to be going with Paradox Interactive as our sponsor. However, this strategy will work with any of the others. Now for a commander profile, in my original stream I went with Futurist, and that is a really good combo, and it is technically the highest difficulty one, but in the interest of showing off a more, well, I want to say a vanilla commander, one that doesn't lend its strength too heavily to our strategy here, showing that this strategy will work even if we don't have a specific commander, I'm going to go with the Ecologist. But again, should work with any of them. In fact, some of them will probably make this strategy work even more efficiently. Logo doesn't matter. Mystery, I'm going to go random. Okay, so the way I'm going to be doing this series is in phases, and each phase is going to be marked by a rocket. What we put on the rocket and what needs to happen in between the rockets. So our very first rocket is, of course, very, very important. So first things first, let's go bottom to top here. Orbital Probes. Do not ever buy these things. They are a ripoff at 100 million each, especially if you're playing on a harder difficulty with very limited funding. We do not want to buy that. No Orbital Probes. You're fine starting off with just 5 electronics. Same thing with 15 machine parts and 10 polymers. That's perfectly peachy for your first foray. I would not recommend bringing any of the RCs on your very first rocket because your terrain is not going to be very well explored, and these guys kind of need explored terrains to be, well, useful to you. So we're going to say no thank you to both of them. Now, let's dive here into Prefab Buildings. Now, originally I was sort of banking on a strategy where I would forego the moisture evaporators or hoping to try and fish out a water deposit. You cannot bank on that. Your water deposits, no matter what the water rating of your selected landing location is, can possibly be very far from you. So we are going to use Vaporators. Not only that, we're going to use 2 of them and 2 refineries. This specific number, having 2 Vaporators to 2 fuel refinery, this works out really well in the early game, but has an important transitional reason for it later on, which I will demonstrate in later episodes. We also want to grab ourselves a drone hub, because we do want a place to control the drones even when the ship is gone. And that leaves us with about 7,000 kilograms worth of space, and waste not, want not. Let's fill that bad boy up with drones. More drones means more workers doing our bidding. Right then, once again, we're going to go with the only proper name for this, Sharky. Now today, we are going to be going on to a different location that I've discovered, and that is 90 degrees south, 17 west. And what I meant to say was 70 degrees south, 17 west. So this little site at the tip of the planet here has a workable amount of resources, but nothing that would make things too easy, and has all 4 threats present. meteors a little bit more so. I've noticed that if the threat is down at just 1 pip, that threat almost never appears, so you might as well not have to deal with it. By having a map that has at least 2 pips in all the threats, we're going to have to deal with all the threats. My series here is going to show you how to deal with all of the different threats that might come your way.
Come to Mars.
All right. And of course, in my demonstration of don't count on water, folks, of course, we land on a tile that has water on it. That's okay. That's okay. Because we're not actually going to tap into it for our very, very first dome. This is a somewhat problematic setup here, a little curlicue, but we'll make do. We'll make do. Right then, first things first, you want to take a look at your starting tile here. And more importantly, you want to point out each of the different surface minerals. When you land your ship here, it is important that all of these surface minerals are within its landing zone, as well as your initial concrete. While starting with a plot of water in your starting zone is not guaranteed by any measure, starting with some modicum of a concrete deposit is. And what you generally want to do is you want to get this as far out as possible while still containing everything that needs to be contained. This is pretty good, and yeah, it's warning me that I'm plopping down, I'm peeking into an unexplored sector. That's okay, because even if we somehow land on a deposit, the ships are eventually going to be leaving and therefore moving, so we're not going to be getting rid of anything valuable just because we're setting down here. Right then, now, one of the other aspects of the game is randomized tech trees. So let's see what we've got available to us. There's a number of very key techs that make this strategy work, and whether or not they appear early for you is going to be random, but there's ways that we can sort of stack the deck in our favor. Now, looking at our initial outlay here, not great. I do like starting with Life from Mars here. Not only are there a couple of social techs that are very important to our build here, but it also helps us once we start getting colonists. Now, one other tip here for research: never ever only have one tech going at once. You always want to have at least one other thing queued up. Otherwise, you might waste a little resource once a tech is researched. So I'm going to go ahead and queue up Decommission Protocol. Completely useless to us at the moment, but an essential part of our build later on. The other alternative might be low-G turbines, but this is sort of a cherry on top. Also, if you are playing on a harder difficulty level, do not waste your money on outsourcing. Don't worry, we'll be getting beakers of our own soon enough. And of course, let's not forget to scan sectors. You want to prioritize sectors that are near where you are landing, and also contain a lot of buildable materials, and are also somewhat close by. Because of the unfortunate shape here, we are going to have to be a little creative. But that's okay. That's okay. We'll just walk our way around the planet. All right, touchdown, Sharky. Now, one thing we want to get here, all right, it is an average quality concrete deposit, which is fine for 452 total resources there, which is also fine. Sometimes you can get kind of shafted with concrete deposits. But hopefully that will not be the case for us. Right then, so having touched down here, our drones are about to disembark. But waste not, want not, let us get going and planning out our build right away. So, first things first, you do want to get yourself a concrete extractor. Now, as far as positioning it, keep an eye on that stat, see where it says available resource. Moving that around can actually yield different amounts, even on the same deposit. I don't know the specific rhyme and reason for that, but what we do want to do is you want to move and maneuver it until you get something good. Usually, if you can get something that's over 300, that's gonna be perfect, because this basically due to the shape of this, even though it said it had 400 something, we're only going to get as much as one of these things can chomp down on it. So we're going to want to make this count. 298 is not bad. I don't want to stomp too heavily on the water deposit here, although we can still tap into it. Now I think the best I'm going to get is that 298 right here. Perfect. Right then, so as part of our things, we're going to need some power. And in the very early game, we're going to want to rely on solar. Solar is definitely going to be the way to go, although we can supplement it and hybridize it with a few other bits and pieces to help us, well, protect against some of the disasters that might be lurking. So what we're going to do here is there's a bit of a golden ratio when it comes to solar panels and batteries. If you want to have them give up their goodness and power your stuff 24/7 even once the sun goes down, this is a very important ratio to keep in mind. You can get away with, technically speaking, 6 solar panels, 6 large solar panels, that is, to one battery. However, that leaves 0 room for error. If you have a cable fault or any other kind of hiccup along the line, your battery will go dead and your power system will be disrupted. So it is always best to add a little bit extra. So it's actually the best ratio, 6.5. So we're going to do 1 little solar panel there, and of course 1 battery. And these things will provide 20 power day and night reliably, except in a dust storm. But that's kind of why we're going to be hybridizing here. Now, the other thing you want to do is build them, if you can, build them close to some of the ground deposits, because that will just mean they get built quicker, because the drones have to harvest the metals from here to bring it to here anyway. Now, when we... one of the other things we're going to do, and this is going along lines of hybridizing, is the total power output that we're going to be putting our initial network through is going to be 30 power. We're going to be doing 30 power worth of consumers. However, a battery can only handle 20. So what are we going to do in this case? We're going to supplement with some wind turbines. 2 of them to be exact. Now, these aren't going to be built for a while because they require concrete. In fact, we don't want them built for a little while. Let's just say we want them built once the concrete comes up and running, but we want the power accumulator built first. That's a bit more important. Right then, let's get a power cable over to here. Cables neat, please and thank you. Right then, so this will give our system enough juice. Now we need to sit down and plan out the rest of our energy consumers. One of which is going to be our drone hub. We're going to want to get this bad boy down here. Now, part of me, I used to try and use drone hubs to try and leapfrog into as much territory as possible, but I've found through experimentation that, you know what, that's not really all that effective. I mean, it's effective in covering more ground, but in the super early game, you don't need to cover that much ground. It's actually better to keep everything close together, make everything more efficient. So we're going to go ahead and, rather than scanning things out and waiting for a sweet spot to scan out, we're just going to plop one right down here near the rest of our stuff. The other thing we want to plop down good and early is a sensor tower. This thing we want up and running as quickly as possible, mainly because this thing is going to be how we scan out tiles in a somewhat efficient manner. This is the other reason why I didn't go with the futures, because they get the improved sensor towers, so you can kind of spam them, and I don't want to teach a strategy that depends on one specific profile. That's why I switched over to the ecologist. Right then, so let us unpause. We should have what we need for at least our first phase. Our first phase is just getting our power up and running, as well as our drones and our concrete. And this sometimes happens where the drones obnoxiously think there isn't enough to do when there is more than enough to do. But soon enough they will figure things out and realize, oh crap, we gotta get to work. Yep, there they go. So they are building the power cables. By the way, power cables and pipes are automatically considered priority 3, and thus will generally be built quickly whenever you lay them down, without you having to manually tell them that. Don't worry, we're saving room here for this one. But again, we're not going to depend on it, because this tip is going to assume that you got unlucky and did not get water in your starting region or near your starting region. All right, so we've got our first panel up and running. We've got our sensor tower boosting. Now what the sensor tower does is, see where it says sensor towers boost 353%? We are now scanning this sector a lot faster because we have this sensor tower. Now the boost goes down the further away it goes from here. So as you expand your network, you'll want to build more sensor towers, but having just one is definitely worth the price of admission. Not to mention, sensor towers will help give you a greater degree of forewarning when disasters come, so you can sort of plan around that. Alright, so the power accumulator is just waiting for the concrete to be made. Concrete is making its way through here. While not strictly required, I usually like to put down some waste rock sites just so they don't crud up the place around here. Oh, the other thing is, once your drones have done everything they can and they're starting to get a little bored, throw down some depots. Now, a couple of tips with these depots. Put them near your drone hub. Drones coming to and from deliveries will frequently run low on power, but they'll still continue their journey, or at least be able to finish it efficiently if they have a place to recharge, rather than having to stop where they're going and going all the way back to the ship. The other thing is, and I will get into the reasoning for this a little bit later, is place your depots, when possible, next to a wire. No, they do not require, nor do they consume electricity, but it is still an advisable thing to do. I usually like to put down a universal depot, a metals depot, and a concrete depot. You don't need these two right away. The universal is fine by itself for a little bit, but at the very least, putting these down will get the drones busy. They'll start emptying out all the goodies on the ship, as well as start harvesting up all the surface metals that they can get their hands on and bringing them here to a more easily accessed area. And while we're waiting for things to happen, yeah, unfortunately, our battery was not finished quite in time, so things are going to sit idle for the night. Not ideal, but not the end of the world either. All right, I'm going to fast forward through here. But we're not actually utilizing as much power as we're producing here, which is fine, because the next phase of our build here will involve getting our fuel production going. Now, if you're playing on an easier difficulty level and have access to more than one rockets, technically speaking, you don't need to start worrying about fuel until your last rocket. However, I still recommend getting fuel production going with your first rocket. That way, even if you have extra rockets to land, by the time you're done landing all of your rockets, you've been brewing fuel for a while, and you can start sending some of your rockets back up. Right then, so for our fuel, this comes into the prefabricated buildings that we picked up. Moisture evaporators and the fuels. Each of these produces one, and these do not require a deposit of any sort. They will pull it from the air. The only thing that you have to be mindful of is, see that little radius around it? Yeah, don't put other moisture evaporator radiuses inside each other, or they will sap each other's effectiveness. So what I'll usually do here is I'll put one down here, and then I'll put the other one, say, down here, and that way they stay apart, yet it's not too far apart. The other thing that we want to do here is we want to get our two refineries that we have prefab. I usually like to put these somewhat closer to our storages and to our rocket here. Just be mindful that you're not putting them too close to dust creators, aka this, because that will make them dirtier faster, and these things require machine parts to maintain, and you do not want to waste those. So we'll put one right here. Yeah, those should be far enough away from both the rocket and that to be fine. And of course, in order to get the water going to these guys, we'll build pipes. You can, of course, build pipes along top of power cables. So that'll work out nicely. Just make sure, yeah, that power cable's not quite long enough. Just barely not quite long enough. Alright. Now the drones will kick into action here and get our fuel production up and running. I usually wait to plop these down until the second day, because that way they're not accumulating maintenance. And yes, I know, there's water right here. I could get to it with an extractor just as easily. But again, we brought these, and we can now use this water for a future colony. Our first colony will be built entirely assuming that we have no water available. All right, we are getting we've got our two wind turbines up and running, so that is perfect. Now, wind turbines are an interesting beast because they can put out,
Sector scan.
they can put out enough power based on their elevation. We actually have the benefit of being on a somewhat higher elevation, so these guys are getting a little bit of a boost. That being said, I've planned out this build that, assuming that you are at sea level and getting 0 elevation boost, at which point each wind turbine will only produce 5. Now, that being said, if you are rocking an elevation boost, that just cuts down on the number of wind turbines that you ultimately need to build as our build continues onwards. Alright, we are scanning stuff up here. That's good. Definitely want to see the more anomalies, the better. Anomalies are especially important for this particular build. And actually, one of the things that can harm it is having a drought of anomalies. But that being said, it is not, strictly speaking, required. So we are slowly ticking away on our research. Again, easier difficulties might give you a higher sponsor bonus, but this particular strat works even with the church, which has a 0 natural sponsor research. It'll make the research go a little bit slower, but it's not, strictly speaking, required. All right, at this point, our phase 1 is complete. The only thing left for us to do is to wait for these guys to churn out enough fuel to fuel Sharky. Now, because we are the Paradox sponsor, we need 100 fuel instead of the 60 fuel that most sponsors require. So, if you're playing anyone other than Paradox, this phase will end a lot sooner for you.
Sector scanned. Anomaly found.
So that being said, I think we're going to end it here. In our next phase, will begin when we are ready to start filling our next rocket. So I will see you guys then. So if you like this episode and you want to see more like it, go ahead and hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and leave me a comment, good, bad, or indifferent. Your feedback's always welcome. So until next time, this has been Pinstar signing out. See ya.